Welcome everybody to our webinar this afternoon. This is all about paid advertising. Seems a slightly strange thing to say. Can you advertise without paying for it? I'm not sure. But really what we're talking about is Google Ads and trying to make that work for your business, which is split into two sessions this afternoon's, and which is running till 2:30, and same times next Wednesday, the 28th as well. Now, the slides that I'm using are going to be shared with you after the webinar as a PDF. So you'll all receive those slides. Don't feel you've got to write everything down or remember everything that you see, because you are going to get the slides. Of course, if you've got any questions as I progress through this webinar, then please do ask away. I have you on my screen. I've also got the chat box open. So if you've got a question, then feel free to speak it. You know, it's not a big group, so that won't be a problem. But equally, if you'd rather type the question, then please use the chat function in Zoom to do that. And I've got those windows open here, so should be able to spot those as we go through. Okay, so this is all about paid search initially. And paid search, also known as pay-per-click advertising, PPC, sometimes referred to as cost per click or CPC. Some platforms call it paid listings, sponsored listings. They label things differently in different places. But these are all really interchangeable terms for the same thing. And the most widely known of these is Google Ads. There is a Bing or Microsoft, as it now is, equivalent, unsurprisingly called Microsoft Ads. Bing Ads as was, MSN back in the day. These are both self-service platforms. So the idea is, you know, you're not, for those of you that have never even looked at these, you're not paying somebody to design an advert and list it on Google for you and just make things happen. It's all about setting this up to run these campaigns yourself. So quite different to advertising in a newspaper where you say, yes, I want to advertise, here's my ad, and off you go. Or they may even offer to design it for you and all the rest of it. You've got to do it all yourself effectively with these platforms. And this is pretty much universally true, with the odd exception of all online advertising, not just Google and Bing ads, but also Facebook ads, Twitter ads, Pinterest ads, all the rest of it. They're all auction-based systems. And what that means is that when you advertise, you are effectively bidding against other people also wanting to advertise. You're bidding against them to display your ads to your target audience. Now, of course, your audience can be targeted in different ways. And what we're talking about with paid search is predominantly targeting people based on what they've actually searched for. Basically keywords, and you probably have heard the term keywords, I'm sure. Keywords meaning things that match what somebody's typed in for their search, and when it matches, the system displays your ads. But that's where the auction comes into play, because in almost all cases, there'll be more than one advertiser who wants their ads to display for those same keywords, and so you're bidding against them. Now, I'm going to explain a little later how the bidding system works, and ultimately that's how the system works out whose ad is in which position and how much you pay for a click. So, of course, the point here is, the reason it's called pay-per-click advertising, you're not paying for your ad to be displayed. You're only paying if somebody actually clicks on it to visit your website. So this is another difference to many other kind of classic ways of advertising. You're not actually paying to advertise, you're paying to get the visitor to your website. So if your ads never got clicked on, you wouldn't actually pay a penny. In reality, that wouldn't work very well, because the system will penalize you for not having your ads clicked on. But in essence, that's what's happening here. So you're not paying Google to say, I always want my ad at the top of your search results for this keyword, because whilst that's kind of possible, it's largely not the way that things will work. What you're saying is, I want my ad to be displayed for this keyword. I'm willing to pay up to this amount if you click on the ad when you've searched that keyword. So it's literally pay per click, not pay for your ads to be displayed. The position of your ad will depend on the maximum you're willing to pay compared to the competition, as we'll see in a moment. And there's a whole bunch of other settings to go with it. And those of you who have already logged into and tried to use Google Ads or Microsoft Ads, you will be familiar with the many settings that are in there. So that's something that we're going to explore over the 2 sessions, of course. Just getting back to basics, I'm sure you all appreciate that when you search Google or Bing or any search engine really, when you see your results, many times, certainly not all the time, but many times, you will see a combination of ads and what are called organic listings. And the obvious difference is the ads are pay-per-click ads. So there are advertisers bidding to show you ads on those keywords. The organic results, which are the things that aren't in a box on this page here, starts just down there. These are not something that you pay Google for. They are down to how relevant Google considers those pages to be in relation to whatever it is that you've searched for. So that's a topic for a very different day, a different webinar, talking about search engine optimization and stuff. Obviously, we're focused on the ads, and the ads in Google search results essentially come in 2 flavors. Search ads, which are the text ads, as they're often called, labeled with a little green ad icon next to them there, and shopping ads, which are different. They are purely for e-commerce retailers, and obviously they consist of a picture, the name of the product, the name of the seller, and the price. They don't always appear. Obviously, it depends what you've searched for and whether it's the kind of thing that you might buy online. Equally, search ads will only show if there are advertisers who want to trigger their ads based on what you've searched for. And if you search for something that nobody wants to use to advertise to you, obviously you won't see any ads. Bing, of course, is largely the same. They will also show up to 4 ads at the top of the search results. They will also show shopping ads when it's relevant to do so. But Bing will also show ads on the right-hand side, something that Google used to do, but a good few years ago now, they stopped doing that. I forget how long now, 6 years ago, something like that. So the same principles are at work. And in fact, if you were to use Microsoft Ads, you can sync, or you can import and sync your campaigns direct from Google Ads. So running Microsoft Ads is generally a fairly easy thing to do, because if you've got Google Ads working and you're reasonably happy with it, you can then port that into Microsoft Ads and do exactly the same thing on Bing and expand your reach. But of course, the truth is that Google has a 90+% market share in the UK. So if you're advertising in the UK, everybody thinks of Google first, because that's where the vast majority of your potential customers will be as well. But there is another 8% maybe of people to reach if you are using Microsoft Ads on top of that. But the general sort of advice there is get Google Ads working to a level you're happy with, and then expand it into Microsoft Ads. Now, your ads can also appear not just on Bing and Google, but also other places where search engines appear, where search engines can be found, rather, and that includes things like ISP homepages. So you've got Virgin Media, their website, their homepage has a search function built into it, which is actually powered by Google. So the shopping ads that you see there, the text ads that you see as well, these are actually just the same Google ads. They don't require any separate system or separate campaigns to be generated. You just, you choose whether you want your ads to be shown on what Google calls the search partners or not. And if you tick that box, then this is the kind of place that your ads might appear. It's worth being aware that search partners is a relatively broad definition of search. It does include fairly obvious things like Virgin Media, Sky's homepage, that kind of stuff, but it also includes eBay. And search partners can behave and perform very differently depending on your choice of keywords or what shopping ads you're running, because if your stuff starts to appear on eBay, those ads are down at the bottom of eBay search results. Obviously, eBay is a very different thing to Google as a search engine, so the performance of those can be very different. So it's certainly something that can work. It can work quite well using the search partners. It increases the sort of reach of the ads. but it's also something that can, in some cases, not work very well. And therefore, if you do choose to use it, you do need to keep an eye on it. And that's perhaps something that we'll touch on in next week's session as well. So a question which people often ask about these ads, do they work? People often say to me, I never click on the ads. I don't click on the ads. And, you know, I quietly think to myself, you're talking rubbish. If you never click on an ad, I simply don't believe you. You probably just don't know that they're ads. And you can see here, over half of adults, when surveyed, don't know the difference between an ad and an organic result. So we've got you know, over half of the population clicking away, not even knowing that the ads and the organic rankings are two different things. So in that sense, yes, they work because people don't even know that they're separate to everything else. And if you look at a very, very, very broad average, advertisers return £2 for every pound that they spend. But you know, these are very, very, very broad averages. Advertisers I work with can see anything up to a 15-to-1 return realistically. Other advertisers, you know, they can really struggle to make this work. And I think it's fair to say at this point, yes, they work overall. Obviously, Google makes over 90% of its revenue from these ads. If they didn't work, people wouldn't spend the sort of money that they do. And so, you know, in that sense, yes, of course they do. But it's not something for everybody. There can be scenarios where your business model or the size or strength of the competition that you've got is to such an extent that, you know, they can pay more for the clicks than you can, because they can make more money from those clicks. They can convert those clicks into customers more easily, or they've got a completely different business model that means those clicks are worth a lot more to them than they are to you. And that's when it becomes difficult. And I suppose to give you one idea of where that's often the case, if you were running a bed and breakfast, let's say, and you wanted to advertise on something like bed and breakfast Humberside, bed and breakfast Lincolnshire, whatever, then what you'll find is that you're competing with all the big cottage listing sites, maybe, or bed and breakfast sites. And obviously you're advertising your one bed and breakfast. So somebody clicks through, they either want it or they don't, and then they'll leave. If they click through, let's say paying a very similar amount for the advertiser paying, that they click through to one of these listing sites with 200 bed and breakfasts on it, they've got 200 times the chance that that person will become a customer. And obviously their conversion rates are higher. So they can afford to pay more for the clicks because their business model is very different. And that kind of scenario is where you might struggle to use pay-per-click advertising. But if it's like for like, with other people that are already advertising for the same kinds of things, then chances are, if you know what you're doing, yeah, absolutely, it will work. So paid search is good, firstly, because it's immediate traffic. You can set up a campaign and have your ads live on Google within you know, an hour or two, even if you've never created one before. So it's great to get traffic quickly. And if you're launching something new, if you're trying to run special offers, and you want to be able to turn things on and off quite quickly, you know, turn the traffic up, right, don't need it anymore, special offers ended, or it's not Christmas anymore, or whatever. It's good for getting traffic quickly and then stopping it when you don't need it anymore. It's good to back up other channels as well. So if people find your site through organic search, or they, you know, you're big on social media and they go to Google and search for you, or something that you do, then obviously you can use the ads to make sure that you're seen for that as well. Generally speaking, you know, the most common reason people use Google ads is because there are people searching for what they're trying to sell, and that's crucial. You know, it's difficult to use search ads if people aren't searching. So if you're trying to launch a new product or service and people don't even know that it exists, and it's not the type of thing that anybody would think to look for because they didn't realize it was there to have, paid search is not really going to help you, because there'll be nobody searching in the first place. But if they're just looking for the kind of things that you do, you know, if you sell doors, or you sell cheese, or you sell God knows what, if you're offering services, you know, if you do conveyancing for house purchases, if you're an accountant, if you offer house cleaning, whatever it is, obviously these are things that people search for every day on Google in big numbers, and so that's when it would most likely work. It also helps to know what the conversions you're hoping to achieve are worth to you. So when I say conversions, I mean turning these visitors into customers. Now that might be leads, so your website might be there to generate inquiries, and obviously if you're selling online, it's there to generate direct sales. If you know what an inquiry is worth to you, or what rate of return you need in order to be profitable when you're selling stuff, so let's say you've got a 20% margin, that means that you need to spend 1/5 of the average order value just to break even. Because if you're going to spend 20% of what you make on Google Ads, then if your margin is 20%, that's obviously break even, or most likely a loss. So you need to work out what rate of return do I need, or what can I afford to pay for every inquiry that I generate, because then you've got the yardstick against which to measure the performance of the campaigns. And that's very, very important, because running PPC without knowing the target that you're trying to hit makes it very, very difficult to optimize those campaigns, or of course, fundamentally know whether you're actually generating profit or loss. So really, really important before you start running campaigns to have a good handle on what the cost per lead you might pay is, or what the rate of return you need if you're selling online, and then you can use that as your target. It's not usually a useful tool if you have low margin products, because of course your margin is going to be eaten up by the cost of the clicks. Very high competition sectors tend to mean you've got big players in there that are willing to spend more than you might be. Not always true, but quite common. As I say, things that people aren't even aware of, they're not going to be searching, so you're not really going to get any traffic. You also, I think it's fair to say, if you've never run these kinds of campaigns before, then you should be thinking that to some extent, at least in the early days, this is market research, this is experimental expenditure to determine whether it might work. Point being, don't expect a brilliant return on investment on day one of running these campaigns, because that's possible, but it's probably not realistic for most of us. There is an element of test and learn with this kind of thing, and you need to be prepared that you have to spend some money without really getting any return, at least to start with, so that you've then got that information and data, and then you can generate better performing campaigns that do have an ROI that makes sense. The other crucial thing here, of course, is you can have the best campaigns in the world. They could be brilliantly set up, optimized to perfection, all the rest of it. But if you're sending people to a poor website, it's all for nothing. So the other crucial thing to make sure before you start running pay-per-click campaigns is my website good enough? Do I have the right pages to send people to that are going to do the job of converting these visitors into leads or sales? Now, that, if you've got an e-commerce site, the products are on the page, the checkout is good, it's all secure, the price is clear, the delivery details are clear, then yeah, fine, you can just start sending traffic there. If you're trying to generate inquiries, you need to make sure that if somebody searched for a particular keyword, when they click on your ad, they're going to land on a page which is clearly about that keyword and is very tailored to try and generate the inquiry. I make that point because many advertisers make the mistake of just sending the clicks to the homepage or sending them to a page on the website which wasn't designed with this in mind. And as a result, it's suboptimal in terms of actually getting people to take an action and send in that inquiry form or pick up the phone, whatever you're trying to get people to do. You really want pages that are focused on that, because you stand a much better chance of getting a return on the spend on your ad campaigns. Okay. So I keep talking about spending money. That may well raise the question in your minds, how do you pay for these things? Clearly, without some kind of cap, there would be the risk that this spend runs away very quickly and you end up with a huge bill. Good news is that's not going to happen, because you set a daily budget for each campaign. And that daily budget is, in essence, something that the system will not overspend. In reality, it's a little bit more complex. Google will actually, and Microsoft Ads is the same, they will average your daily budget over 30 days, or technically 30.4 days, because that's the average length of a month. And then they will make sure that over that period of time, over any period of 30.4 days, you don't spend more than the total of your daily budget multiplied by 30.4. But as a result, your actual spend from one day to the next might vary, and the system will allow it up to double your daily budget as long as it stays within that rolling average over the 30.4 days. And the reason for that is obviously for the systems to maximize revenue for the platforms, but also it reflects the reality for many of us, which some days are quieter than others. And in many cases, it would be the weekends are quieter than weekdays. And if your daily budget was strictly adhered to, you might be in a situation where you hit the budget every weekday, and then at weekends you spend very little. Now, if you were willing to spend the same amount every day, 7 days a week, you'll spend less than you intended, and you'll get less traffic and less inquiries or sales than you intended as well. If the system, which it does, spends more on the weekdays because it knows that you spend less at weekends, and you spend the total amount over 7 days that you would have expected to, then clearly the benefit is mutual. You will get more traffic and hopefully more inquiries and sales, and obviously Google and Bing make more money. So in that sense, it's mutual. Now, the way that you actually pay, literally, generally, you can either prepay. So you can, like a prepay mobile, you can load up your account with a certain amount of money, and then it will chip away until you've spent it all, until you've got to top it up. Or, and this is more common, you pay in arrears, but you essentially have a credit limit. And generally, so for Google, for example, you might start out with a £200 credit limit, or possibly even less. And so, the spend just keeps on going. But every time the total spend reaches £200, another payment is taken off your card, excuse me, and then you can carry on spending, hit another £200, takes another payment off the card. After a little while, that credit limit will go up, but it generally doesn't go up beyond £500 unless you're a particularly big advertiser and you have a conversation with Google about that. It is even possible for big advertisers, and I'm talking about people that spend tens of thousands of pounds a month, to have a more traditional invoicing structure with Google, where they spend their money over the month, and then Google sends them an invoice and they pay the invoice under the terms. But that's rare unless you're a very big advertiser. So for most of us, it's a case of card details in, or a direct debit if you prefer, and then the money will automatically be taken by Google or Microsoft every time you hit the credit limit. One trick here is definitely to, if you are VAT registered, make sure you put your VAT details into your payment settings. Otherwise, you're going to get charged VAT at the Irish rate of 21% that you can't claim back. So you definitely don't want your ads to be 21% more expensive than they should be. So if you are VAT registered, then make sure you put that in. Okay, here's the clever bit. This is the bidding system, essentially. Now, the basic system, if the sort of original form of Google Ads, or AdWords, as some of you will probably remember it was called, is based on a cost per click by keyword mechanism. So essentially, you would have a list of keywords, and you choose the maximum you're willing to pay for a click for each of those keywords. And of course, you could have different maximums. So some keywords will be worth more to you than others. That's just the nature of how people search. So you would have your list of keywords, each with their maximum cost per click. And the way that the system will calculate where your ad should appear in the list of however many ads there are, and what you will actually pay if your ad gets clicked on, comes down to this, the ad rank calculation. So your ad rank calculation is the maximum you're willing to pay for a click times something called your quality score. Quality score is a score out of 10 for every keyword in your campaign. And we're going to explore that in more detail later, but essentially quality score is the way that Google decides, essentially rewards you for higher performing keywords and campaigns, and indeed penalizes you if they don't work so well. And the biggest element of quality score is the expected click-through rate. So essentially, quality score is largely a reflection of how likely is this ad to get clicked. Now, of course, once the campaigns have been running for a while, you have historic data that says the click-through rate, the percentage of people who click on this ad after searching for this keyword is whatever the percentage might be. So the click-through rate determines, the click-through rate is determined simply by dividing impressions by clicks. Impressions is when your ad is displayed. A click, of course, is when somebody actually clicks on it. And as you saw on a previous slide, the average click-through rate is a touch under 2%. But again, it varies enormously. Some campaigns will have click-through rates into double figures. Others will be less than 2%. And there's all manner of reasons why that might be. But essentially, the quality score, the score out of 10, is derived from your click-through rate, along with Google's rating of your relevance of your ad and the experience of your landing page. The landing page being the page on your website that you'll get to if you actually click on that ad. So if your landing page is not clearly relevant to the keyword in question, you'll get a poor landing page experience score, and that will drag down the quality score. If your landing page loads slowly, if your landing page doesn't clearly have terms and conditions and a privacy policy linked to it, that may drag down the score as well, and the quality score goes down. So all of these factors come together to give this keyword score out of 10 called quality score. Now, when you multiply the maximum bid, the maximum cost per click, by that quality score, you get what Google calls ad rank. So your ad rank score is how Google decides where your ad is in the list. So the highest ad rank figure of all the eligible advertisers is the ad that goes at the top of the list. The next highest score is second, the next highest score is third, and so on. So the position is fairly straightforward. Whoever's got the highest cost per click multiplied by the highest quality, well, whoever's got the highest figure by multiplying those two together, they get their ad at the top, and so on. What you actually pay for the click, though, is then a further calculation. So you may well have told Google the maximum you're willing to pay, but remember, this is an auction-based system. Your maximum bid is not automatically the total amount that you pay. It's the maximum you'll pay. You won't pay any more, but you could pay less depending on who else is bidding in that auction. And this is where we get the cost per click calculation. So what happens is you take the ad rank of your closest competitor, which is the ad below yours, you divide it by your own quality score and add 1 pence. And that is how much you pay to Google if somebody clicks on your ad. And if you look at the table at the bottom of the slide here, you can see how that works. Now, I've created a rather extreme example in order for the maths to be very clear on here. You know, you can assume that in the real world, things are much closer than this in terms of the calculations, but it makes the point that it's not necessarily who's willing to bid the highest for a click. It's who's got the highest quality score combined with that cost per click that really does the job. And in my rather extreme example, you can see that the lowest bidder gets their ad at the top and pays the least amount for the click. So what we've got here is advertiser number one bidding a maximum of £2 a click, but they've got a quality score of 10. That's the highest you can get, 10 out of 10. So you multiply the two together, you get the ad rank of 20. That's higher than anybody else, so that's the ad at the top of the list. Now, to calculate what this advertiser should pay, we know the maximum bid, but actually it depends on these are the factors. So we then take the competitor's ad rank. So the next competitor here has a score of 16. You divide that by your own quality score. So it's this figure 16 divided by 10. That's 1.6, so £1.60 plus 1p. So what they actually pay is £1.61. Now the next advertiser, they're willing to pay twice as much for a click, but because they've got a poor quality score, only 4 out of 10, their ad rank is 16, lower than 20, so their ad is actually below the other advertisers. And what they pay depends on the ad rank of the next advertiser down the list. Now their ad rank is 12. 12 divided by 4 plus 1p gives you a figure of £3.01. So you've got the advertiser whose ad is below somebody else's paying almost double the ad above them if it gets clicked on. And the same is kind of true of the next one, where it's £4 where they're paying more than the advertiser. But if there are only 4 advertisers in this auction, so there's only 4 people who want to use that particular keyword, then they will pay the minimum bid. Now, the minimum bid is an interesting thing because it is not 1p, as you might expect. The minimum bid is something that Google calculates based on a number of factors, a secret source really that they don't fully explain to people, and as a result the minimum bid will vary depending on the keyword in question. Quite a handy way for Google to price gouge really, because obviously they're pretty much a monopoly, and they can ultimately decide what that minimum bid should be. So even if you're the only advertiser on a keyword, nobody else is bidding on it, you might think, oh, I only get to pay 1p, that's great. Not true. Google will decide what the minimum should be, and you'll have to pay whatever they've decided. And they don't tell you what that is. You'll see what your cost per click is, but there's no specific bit of the system that says, oh, the minimum bid for this keyword is X. You'll just see what your cost per click is. So it's obviously rigged in Google's favor. But this is important to understand because it isn't simply who pays more gets their ad at the top. It's a combination of who's willing to pay more and how good that quality score is. So getting your quality score as high as possible for every keyword is clearly part of the game here. Okay, so that's how the system works. Let's have a look at the practical nature of using Google Ads. So the structure is, as you see on the slide here, that the very top level, the thing that you log into if you're using Google Ads is your account. And your account is where your payment details live. It's where you can add other people as users to be able to log in. It's where you could set up conversion measurement, something we'll talk about later. It's where you can have what are known as audience lists. So the account is kind of the global top level of everything that's going on in there. The actual campaigns themselves are almost like folders, if you like, within your account. Each campaign has a variety of settings, and you can see those listed on the slide there. So the campaign is where you set your daily budget. The campaign is where you do your geographical targeting, so where in the world or where in the country you want the ads to appear. And it's where you can change settings in terms of bidding on devices, computer, tablet, mobile. It's where you can schedule your ads, days, times of day. It's where you choose which networks, like the search partners, for example. It's where you set your bid strategy, which we'll talk about in a second. It's where you apply your audiences. So campaigns are an important thing. And getting this structure right in your head is a key thing, because some people will make the mistake of creating one single campaign and then basically putting everything into that one campaign. But because you've got all these different options at the campaign level, the truth is that most of the time you'll want more than one single campaign, even if that is simply to split your overall budget between 2 different things. So imagine that you've got one single campaign. Every keyword and all the rest of it that you want to target is in that one campaign. If you've got a keyword or a few keywords in there that are way more popular than the others, what can happen is that the budget will be consumed by the keywords that generate all the interest, and your budget will all be used up. Unless you've got a really big budget, the budget could disappear on those big keywords, and all the other things in that campaign never even get a look in. You'd never even know if they work or not, because the budget's already been eaten up by these other keywords. So you never get any clicks or impressions for the rest of the keywords, so you can never judge if they work well or not. If you split the campaigns out, you could put the popular keywords into one campaign, and if they eat all the budget, so be it. But you've then got a separate budget which isn't going to be touched by those more popular keywords that you can use for the other keywords, and then you can actually get some visibility and some data from those keywords, and obviously then you'll know what works better, and so you can change things up as you might want to. So campaigns are an important part of this concept, because often you'll need to split campaigns out, or you might want to do something like have £5 a day budget for Humberside, a £5 a day budget for Lincolnshire. You can target both of those places in a single campaign, but that means that the budget will be eaten up by whatever gets the most clicks. If you split them out, then you're saying, no, Lincolnshire will always have £5 a day budget and Humberside will always have £5 a day budget. And if Humberside eats up the whole £5, I've got my other £5 to be used in Lincolnshire because I want it evenly spread in that way. Or I want £7 a day for Humberside and £3 a day for Lincolnshire, whatever you want to do. But if it was a single campaign and you say, I've got a £10 a day budget, there we go, let's cover Humberside and Lincolnshire, you've got no control over how much of that gets spent in either area. And there may be good reasons why you do want that control. And if that's the case, you will need separate campaigns to do it. Even if everything else in the campaign is identical between the two, it's the same keywords, the same ads, the same landing pages on the website. But because you want to split the budget between them in that way, you'll need to do that in separate campaigns. So that's an important part of it. Campaigns are then essentially where holders, really, if you like, for ad groups. And ad groups are containers for the keywords and the ads, or in the case of shopping campaigns, the products that you're actually advertising with. So ad groups are almost like subfolders, really, of campaigns. And the ad groups are where you list your keywords. It's where you can find out what the search terms are, which trigger those against those keywords. You can add negative keywords, which are things you can use to stop your ads from showing. It's where the ads themselves live that you will have written, and extensions to ads, which is something we'll look at in audience as well. So ad groups are obviously an important thing. And the idea here is that because ad groups contain the keywords and the matching ads, the idea is that you use the ad groups in a sort of thematic way. So rather than have one single ad group full of all the keywords that you're interested in, you split them out into tightly themed groups. And the reason for that is that you've got to write the ads to match the keywords. And if you've got a very large list of disparate keywords, it's impossible to use all of those keywords and make your ads relevant to every one of those keywords because you just don't have enough text in the ads to do so. That will then affect your quality score. And we know how important that is. So the idea with ad groups is each ad group is a list of relatively short list of keywords, which are all closely related. And then you've got ads that correspond to those keywords. And when you've got keywords that are a little bit different, or you want to send people to a different landing page on the website, for example, then you'd probably do that in a separate ad group. So you can write the ad to be tailored to those keywords and obviously set the landing page to a different one. So we'll see examples of this in a second, but that's the way it is. And of course, down at the individual keyword level is where you set the bids, is where you'll see the quality score, because quality score works on an individual per keyword basis. Obviously, its ad groups are also where you've got the individual ads. And as you'll see, you know, the best practice is to have several ads simultaneously so that you can test them against each other. And of course, it's where you set the landing pages. So that's the structure. If you've never seen Google Ads before, this is what it looks like. I'm going to log into a live account just here so you can see what that looks like. So this is kind of at the top level when we've logged into Google Ads here. And you can see here on the left-hand side, these are all the campaigns that live within this particular account. And the little icons denote what type of campaign. So if you've got the magnifying glass, they're search campaigns. And if you've got the little kind of price tag, those are shopping campaigns. Shopping campaigns we will be talking about next week. So I'll ignore those for now. But you see here, we've got a number of search campaigns as well. And if I click into the menu here on the left, so you've effectively got a two-tier menu here. You've got the campaigns listed down the left, and then you've got kind of the menu in a more traditional sense here. And if I click on campaigns, you'll see here that the campaigns are listed with a whole bunch of data in this table. And you can see, for example, what the daily budget is set to for each of these campaigns, whether it's eligible or there's any issues with it. So If the status was flagging up that there was a problem of some sort, it would be shown in here. It tells me what type of campaign it is, shopping, search, or whatever. And here are all the metrics. So these are some of the things that tell us how the campaigns are performing. So as I mentioned, impressions, which is this column here, that's the total number of times an ad has been displayed from each one of these campaigns. And then the next column, headed interactions, actually relates to clicks, as you can see here. And that is how many clicks ads have received from that campaign, which then gives us what Google calls interaction rate, or more commonly known as the click-through rate, which of course is a percentage as a function of clicks from impressions. So those three are highly related: impressions, clicks, and click-through rate. You've then got the average cost per click, so the average CPC. You can see that there. That's the actual average amount paid for a click from each of those campaigns. Cost is, of course, the total amount spent in the period of time that we're selected. So usually when you log in, it'll show you the last 30 days of data. You can see that here. So over the last 30 days, each campaign has spent however much is in the list here. And then we've got data about conversions. So you'll remember conversions are when somebody takes an action on your site as a result of clicking on one of your ads. So a conversion could be an actual online transaction on an e-commerce site, or it could be an inquiry submission. You can measure other things if you want to, mailing list signups, people that click on an email address, whatever you want to measure. But the crucial thing is that those conversions should be meaningful. They should have a value to the business. It's not worth measuring conversions if it's somebody just looking at a web page and they may or may not be interested. That's not a conversion. A conversion is when somebody takes an action and it has a value to your business. So all of the other columns here relate to conversions. So the total number of conversions, the cost per conversion, the conversion rate, so what percentage of clicks turn into a conversion, the value of the conversions. You may not always get that if you haven't set it, but on an e-commerce site, it's reporting the actual sales value in here. And here is essentially your rate of return, conversion value divided by cost. So, you know, this campaign, for example, at the top there, is making a 12.86 to 1 return. So every pound spent generates £12.86 in revenue. And if you know what your rate of return needs to be in order to make a profit, clearly that measurement is very, very important to you. So all of that data is in here. We'll talk about how you actually measure those conversions later. One thing to note is, and you may be wondering how you can have decimal places here. How can you have a 0.63 of a conversion? And without wanting to get too complex, the answer to that is attribution. What you see there is Google Ads using some machine learning to calculate how many conversions your campaigns played a part in. So if you imagine some people that visit your website, they don't just land on your website, fill in an inquiry form and go. They may visit your website multiple times. One of those times, several, possibly all of those times, might be clicks on your ads. But in many cases, it's a mixture. So somebody might click on your ad for their first visit. That's how they've discovered the website. But the second visit might be a Google search for your business by name, and they find an organic result. They click through. Maybe you get an inquiry. So what Google Ads is trying to do here is say, well, yeah, technically that inquiry was generated by a visit from Google organic search. It wasn't a click on an ad. But if you hadn't clicked on the ad in the first place, then that inquiry would never have happened. So I'm going to take some credit, not 100%, but I'm going to take a percentage of the credit for that. And that percentage is calculated based on how many visits there have been, how recent they were, where in that number of visits clicks on ads appeared. Was it at the start? Was it in the middle? Was it at the end? All that kind of stuff. So it's a moving kind of figure, but that's why you've got decimal places for conversions. It's not that you can have a 63rd of a conversion, because that doesn't make sense. It's basically Google saying, look, the total number of conversions, if you take into account people who visit your site multiple times, not necessarily always from an ad, but still convert. if you take them into account, then this is the real number of conversions. So that's why that happens. Okay, so various bits of terminology on here, and I've listed some of those on the slide. So clicks is when somebody clicks on the ad. Impressions is when the ad is shown, irrespective of whether anybody clicks. CTR is clicks from impressions. Impressions divided by clicks. So that's the click-through rate. The average cost per click is obviously the average you're spending with Google every time somebody clicks on an ad. Cost is how much you spent. Conversions, just been explaining those. You might see CPA, which is cost per acquisition, or cost per conversion, same thing. And you might also see this figure, ROAS, stands for return on ad spend. That's the rate of return. But ROAS is usually expressed as a percentage. That would be, a 2-to-1 return would be 200%, for example. And that's a figure that you might see in Google Analytics more than you will in Google Ads. Okay, so a bit of terminology there. What about the practicalities of running a campaign? So I will walk you through the campaign creation procedure here. If you go to add a new campaign, then what you would do in the interface here, you go to campaigns, there's this big blue and white plus button here. You click on add a campaign, new campaign, and you'll be presented with this screen here as per the slide. So the first thing to do is tell Google what you're trying to achieve. It might be sales or leads. I don't imagine many of us are too interested in the rest of the stuff on here. I mean, yes, obviously we want website traffic, but it's not just about getting visitors. It's about getting sales and leads. So whichever is right for you, sales or leads, say we want leads. And then you'll be asked to choose what type of campaign. You can see there's actually several. So we'll talk about display ads next week. Those are ads that appear on other websites, not on Google itself. Shopping we'll talk about next week as well. Video means advertising on YouTube. Smart ads, automation does work sometimes, but we'll touch on that later. And there is a type of ad called discovery, because you can actually put your ads into Gmail inboxes as well, but we're not going to get into that. We're talking about search ads, the ones we think of most, the text ads at the top of Google search results. So we choose search, and then we're asked, how are you going to reach your goal? How are people going to, in this case, leads? How are you going to get these leads? Is it by people visiting the website? Is it by people calling your phone? Is it by sending lead forms into you? And it's worth remembering here that the wording is slightly misleading. So what we're talking about here is website visits. So that means somebody's going to do something on your website. They're going to fill an inquiry form, or they're going to outright make a purchase on the website. So if you're trying to generate inquiries via forms on the website, you'd go for website visits and you put in your website address. You can generate calls directly from ads, but for most of us, that might not work. If nobody's ever heard of you, why would they call you straight off your ad? More commonly, they'll want to visit the website first. So even if somebody's going to pick up the phone as a result of visiting your website, the goal is still really website visits. So we do that. You might have shop visits, but that is basically paying money to advertise to get footfall into your premises. Again, that's very difficult to measure. Usually you want to get people to the website and then they decide to come to the shop. So website visits would be right. Unless you're selling a mobile app downloads is not going to be relevant to you. And lead form submissions is an interesting one. I'm going to show you what those are later, but basically you can create ads where people fill in a form from the ad itself without actually visiting your website. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to find one of those for you, for example, on here. Looking for an extension there. Now, I thought I might see a lead form extension in there, which is annoying because I can't. Trying to think of other things that we're going to see one in here. They're not always obvious to spot. No, I've got them on the slides later, but I thought I might be able to ping one up, but annoyingly, whatever I search for, apparently I can't. Get me one. No, I give up. Can't see a lead form extension on these ads, even though I assumed some of these people would be using them. Never mind, we will see one in a second. But that's an extension. A lead form extension is something additional to your ad. So you can tick multiple things here, as you can see. But don't worry if you don't tick them at this point, you can add them on later anyway. So you would put in your website URL there. Oops. And as long as that works, then you'll be able to proceed. Okay, I'm not going to proceed at this point because obviously I don't want to create a live campaign, but we'll be able to see it on the slides here. So let's assume you want to generate leads. You choose leads. You then click on search here. And once you've been through that first page that you just saw on the slide, you're going to be presented with some options. So one of the options is networks. You remember I mentioned search partners before. There's also what's called display, which is advertising on third-party websites. My advice, my strong advice to you is never put display into the same campaigns as search. Always keep them separate. Do not run search and display campaigns. It makes the data very difficult to read. The performance of display campaigns is completely different to search. It just makes life very confusing. And your budget may be spent on display display ads that don't work as well as search ads, and it all gets very messy. So yeah, you could run display campaigns. We'll talk about that next week, but you would do that as a separate campaign, not in the same thing as a Google and search partners campaign. It's okay though to have Google and search partners in the same things. That's fine. So you probably do that. Remember, the campaign is where you choose the geo-targeting as well. So you choose which, I mean, all the way down to postcodes if you want to. We'll look at location targeting in a bit more detail in a second, but you know, you could target the entire world all the way down to specific towns or postcodes if you wanted to, and any combination of those as well. You can also set it as a radius around a point, which makes sense for some of us as well. You also choose the language, which I would imagine for most of us is UK English. You choose your bid strategy, and there's a choice here between manual or automated. We're going to talk about that more as we get to the end of the workshop. So I'm not going to go into bidding right now, but the campaign is where you make those settings. As you remember, it's where you set the daily budget. If you need them, you can have start and end dates as well. So if your campaign is going to run for a particular time, let's say it's a pre-Christmas campaign, set it to end on the 22nd of December or whatever, you can do that and that will just happen. So you don't need to remember. Ad extensions, talk about those later, but these are extra bits of ads that make them bigger and add functionality, very important. You can also choose scheduling for your ad, so times and days of the week that you want the ads to run. And you can also choose if you want this to be a dynamic search ads campaign. Again, something I'll explain later. So lots of settings to go into here. And here we have, so this is the second page that you'll get to once you've made your initial choices. So you choose leads, search, website visits, and then you move on to the next step. This is what you'll get. As you can see, this is where you set your daily budget. And Google explains that it can go up and down from one day to another. And below that is how you set your bid strategy. Now, this is very, very important because conversion, well, you sit here, what do you want to focus on? Many of us would say, I want to focus on conversions, which is generating business from this campaign. And of course, that's what we want. But what you're seeing here is essentially machine learning, and machine learning requires enough data to make sense. So that the issue with saying to Google, get me as many conversions as you can for my budget, rather relies on you having enough conversions through your website in the first place, that Google's system can see enough data to say, oh, right, I can understand what's working here. And the system does its job of pulling all the different levers and changing all the bits of settings that it can to achieve what you want. My point ultimately is, if you don't get enough conversions from your site, then telling the system to maximize conversions when you maybe only get 1 or 2 a week, it's probably not going to go very well. If that's the case, you may well want to change the bid strategy to manual bidding. In fact, there are a number of different ways to set this. Google will always try and push you down what they call smart bidding. That's the automation, like the previous screen. But if you don't have enough conversions, it's not going to work too well. So Google, this is Google's suggested minimum, is 30 conversions in the last 30 days if you want to set a target cost per acquisition, and a minimum of 50 conversions in the last 30 days if you want to set a target return on ad spend. So a target cost per acquisition would be, I'm willing to pay up to £20 a lead, for example. Whereas target ROAS is, I need to achieve a return on ad spend of 500%. That would be a 5-to-1 return. Now, target ROAS can only work if you have a value for your conversion. So if you're selling online and it's e-commerce transactions, you need to make sure that Google Ads is getting the data about transactions, which you can do through Google Analytics or separately if needs be. But usually you link Google Analytics in, you've got your sales data in Google Analytics, it flows into Google Ads, that's fine. If you're measuring leads, for example, and you're not putting a value to those leads, then you can't use target ROAS because your ROAS will never be anything other than 0. So we really need to know that you've got enough conversions if you want to use this system. If you don't have enough conversions, then generally I would advise using what's called manual CPC. Now, Google is desperate that you don't use that, so they kind of hide it away. They say it's not recommended. It's not recommended if you have no idea how Google Ads works, but if you do, it's actually quite well recommended. So you'd click on this and you would see all these different bidding strategies come up, whether you want to set target cost per conversion or a target ROAS, and you'll also see manual CPC, manual cost per click bidding. That's the original way that all of this worked. You choose your keywords and you say the maximum you're willing to pay for a click from any one of them. There is also an option for maximizing clicks or maximizing impression share, but you're essentially saying to Google, just get me as much as you can. Ignore the quality, ignore whether it converts or not, just get me as many visitors as possible. And for most of us, that's not a good strategy. You end up getting low quality traffic, you're paying your money for it, you may be paying a lower cost per click, but if it doesn't convert, it's a waste. So generally speaking, those options are to be avoided. Okay, so bid strategies are an important thing to be aware of, relatively new in Google Ads over the last 2 or 3 years. I would definitely pay attention to what those settings are when you're setting up a campaign. Okay, so speaking of setting up campaigns, if you remember, I was saying earlier that campaigns are where you set daily budgets, it's where you do geo-targeting. And my example on the slide here would be 3 different campaigns. We have a brand campaign. So if somebody searches for the name of the business or types the searches for the URL, those kinds of keywords, actual names of websites, for example, then we have a campaign with its own budget there, because usually you always want your ad to be at the top for your own brand name. At this point, some of you are probably thinking, why on earth would I have to pay to get visits to my own website when somebody's looked for my business by name? And the answer would be something like this. Does this still work? You see, years ago, Interflora had a big legal battle with Marks and Spencer's, because Marks and Spencer's bid on Interflora, and Marks and Spencer's ad was at the top when you search for Interflora. That went on for some time, and eventually I think Interflora won. As you can see, M&S certainly isn't here. If I go and search for I don't know, a brand like this appliance city. I know they've only got their own. That's it. Okay, ignore me. I struggle to get an example for my own thing. Let's go for. No, absolutely. Well, I'm not clicking on any ads, so Google's probably decided not to show me ads. Let me try another one here. Trying to think of one to use. No, still nobody's bidding on that because it's not really slippers time. I'm struggling to find you an example here. Short cut to this is you can bid on your competitors' names. Will this work, I wonder? Google just doesn't want to show me the ads, unfortunately. All I'm getting is, okay, Google's refusing to show me what I want, so I'm going to stop doing that. But going back to my point here, why would you pay for clicks on your own company name or your own website address? The answer is you might have competitors bidding on your name, and it is perfectly legitimate to do that within Google's system. Obviously, if competitors do bid on your name and you don't, then their ad may well be at the top of the list when somebody searches for your business, and that's not something people want. So you might well want a campaign for your own brand, and you want that to have a budget so that that budget doesn't get used upon anything else, because you want 100% of the time your website, your ad to be at the top of that list. To make sure that's the case, we have a separate campaign. It's got its own budget. It's not going to get used on anything else. We then have another campaign, in this case, solid oak doors. And solid oak doors are perhaps a higher value item, maybe they're a more popular item, and that's what we sell most of. So we're going to have a campaign for that, and it gets its own budget. We do sell veneer doors as well. So we have a campaign for veneer doors. But the reason that we've made those separate is that solid oak doors is a more important campaign to us. We make more money and make more sales overall from solid oak doors. I don't want solid oak doors to lose visibility because some of the budget's getting burnt on veneer doors. So I have two separate campaigns. Solid oak doors spends as much as I want it to. Veneer doors gets its own budget, probably smaller. Still want the sales and the traffic, but not at the expense of the solid oak doors. So they're made into separate campaigns so that I can control their budgets independently. Okay, so at the very sort of top level of campaigns, we might want different campaigns for that reason. We do that. And then within a campaign, we need ad groups. So remember, ad groups are the containers really for keywords and the corresponding ads. So ad groups have to have a name, of course, as do campaigns. And usually you want the ad group name to reflect what the keywords are going to be. So in my example here, the ad group name is digital marketing agency, and I can set my default bid. So this is my default maximum cost per click for the keywords that I add. Later on, I can change that bid for each individual keyword. I could have a higher or lower bid for any of the keywords I want. But by default, if you don't set the bid for the keyword, it will be £2.01 in this ad group. So we know what the website address is, and Google will either make some suggestions at this point. Well, it will make some suggestions, and you can choose whether to use any of them or not, or you can simply type in the keywords that you want to use in your ad group. So you can see some examples here. They are essentially variations of digital marketing agency, online marketing agency, digital marketing company, internet marketing company, digital marketing agencies, internet marketing, just that basically they're all people looking for the same thing, just using slightly different terminology. So we're using the keywords here, and my point is that these are tightly themed. This is not just one big list of keywords about everything that we do. It's very specifically tightly themed. These are all keywords that basically mean the same thing. So whatever version of those keywords you typed into Google, the ad that you see will be relevant because you're looking for a digital marketing agency. So that's why we're keeping this tightly themed in the ad group. And when it comes to keywords and choosing them, you've got to start somewhere with that list. And usually that's by just thinking, how would I expect my customers to search for this? But be careful, because obviously a lot of words and terms have more than one meaning, can be used in different contexts. Not always people looking for the same thing, even though the words are the same. So the crucial thing here is make a list of how you think people will search. Some won't use the same terminology. So try and think about how people talk to you as customers. What are the words and phrases that they use when they're describing what they want from you? Not everybody uses the same words. Not everybody uses the right words. But the crucial thing here is that you use the same keywords that your customers use, even if they're not technically correct, because otherwise you'll be missing out on that traffic. But at the same time, when you have this list of keywords, think about what other possible meanings people might have for them. What might you actually want? Because you can have a difference between literally being relevant and actually being somebody that wants to pay money for the goods and services that you sell. Not always the same thing. So we only really want to use keywords where there's a strong likelihood that if that's what you've typed into Google, you are looking to spend money with a business like yours. Because if you're not, you'd be wasting your money using those keywords. The more specific the term is, generally, the fewer people are searching for it. But when you're more specific in what you're searching for, you tend to be closer to the point of conversion. So people being specific are more ready to buy, but there's less of them typing these things in. If you go for the broader terms, you might get a lot of traffic, but because they're generally people who don't yet know what they want, who are doing initial investigation and research before making any sorts of decisions, they don't convert well, and that means that you can end up spending a lot of money and get a poor ROI from them. So if you've got a limited budget, as most of us do, then the thing to consider is start with the keywords that say, I want to buy now. So buy online, for sale, people looking for companies, services, agencies, whatever the right terminology is for your type of business. People who are clearly looking for businesses like yours in the way that they search, those are the best keywords to start with. Don't use the broader terms initially, but you can always add them in later. So if you start with some really quite specific terms, and it turns out that you're only getting a couple of clicks a day, and you were hoping to spend more money and to get more clicks, then you can add more keywords in, keywords that are a bit broader, that will get more traffic, and you can measure the conversion rate. But if you start the other way around, you could end up spending all your money on keywords that realistically weren't going to convert. And then you could easily think, well, Google Ads is rubbish, I didn't get any business from it. But if you don't target right in the first place, you can't really expect to get business. And it's not that the system's broken, it's just that it's not been used right. So that's my advice. Start small with keywords which are definitely people who want to buy your stuff, and then you can expand that out as time goes on. But if you start the other way around, you might end up wasting more money. Now, speaking of keywords and search terms, so these are two different things. A keyword is something that you add to an ad group and it triggers the display of your ads. A search term is actually what somebody typed into Google. And what they type into Google can match to your keywords in different ways. And when it does match, that's when the ad gets displayed in a search result. And that's why we've got these different match types. They give you a level of control over when your ad should show or not, based on what somebody's typed in as their search term. So you can see we've got several match types. In fact, there's another slide after this. Exact match keywords have square brackets around them. And unsurprisingly for the name, your ads will be displayed when the exact phrase that you've got within those square brackets is typed in. If somebody types in something else, it doesn't match. So to show you what that looks like in the wild, as it were, in a real setting, let's go for this keyword here. So I'll zoom this up a little because I appreciate it might be tricky to see on Zoom. So we're in an ad group here, and you remember ad groups contain the list of keywords. This is the list of keywords. And you can see these keywords in square brackets. Now those square brackets say exact match. So you would have to type in Oak Mexicano door, exactly that phrase, in order for the ad in this group to show. If you typed in Mexicano door oak, then it would not match this keyword. And if that was the only keyword that you had, obviously, you would not be showing your ads very frequently, because some people will search for different things. They may phrase things differently. They might put the words in a different order. So exact match gives you the most control, but it also limits the visibility, because there's only so many people that will search in exactly the way that you have it here. So if you're just going to use exact match, you have to have a lot of different keywords, because you've got to cover all those different permutations. But then you get phrase match. Now phrase match has speech marks around it. And phrase match these days says, as long as you use all of these words in your search term, I will show the ad. And I'll show you the ad irrespective of how many other words you've also used or what order you've used them in. So as long as LPD, doors, and Mexicano are used in the search term that you've typed into Google, the ad will be displayed. Doesn't matter what order, doesn't matter what other words you've used as well. So if I searched by Mexicano doors by LPD, obviously that's not exactly the keyword, but the ad will still show, because that's the rules of phrase match. So that's an important thing to be aware of. Now, if you, and I don't think we'll see any in here, but if you saw a keyword with no symbols at all, that's what we call broad match. And this is one of the dangerous things about Google Ads, because if you didn't appreciate what match types are, when you add keywords to an ad group, when you create a campaign, you are using broad match keywords. And broad match basically says to Google, as long as what you search for is closely related to this keyword, please show my ad. And I use the phrase closely related in a fairly loose sense. Sometimes Google matches to some pretty weird things, and they are not relevant. So broad match, it gets you the biggest kind of catchment, but it's also a very dangerous thing, because you're allowing Google to match against all manner of things that you might not have intended. And of course, that can create a lot of wastage. So the general advice is, unless you really need to for some strategic reason, or you've got a large amount of money to play with, broad match keywords are a pretty bad idea. There are occasions when they make sense and it's a useful tool, but for most campaigns, you generally wouldn't want to use them, because it opens the gates too wide. Now, there used to be what was called modified broad match, which has plus symbols in front of it. And you can see there's still some keywords in here like this one. But Google changed that back in February and said, we don't need modified broad match anymore. We're changing phrase match to work like it. So the way that I explain phrase match is basically what modified broad match used to do. So you don't need to use that anymore. It's obsolete. You might sometimes see Google talking about search terms that are session-based broad match. And this is where, if I'm searching on Google several times in a row, Google will still show ads, but based on previous search terms, if they're still along the same lines. Again, that won't happen unless you're using broad match, and it can also lead to more wastage. Now, those match types are all well and good, but we do have a balance to them known as negative keywords. So you can actually stop your ads showing if somebody types in a word or phrase which you have listed as a negative keyword. And negative keywords, unsurprisingly, have minus symbols before them. But they don't live in the keywords section. They have a separate area in the navigation here called negative keywords. And negative keywords can use the same match types. So, for example, a broad negative of accommodation. What we're saying there is basically anything to do with accommodation. If somebody's searching for Mexicano doors and talks about accommodation, they are not buying doors. We don't want their clicks. So we've got that as a negative. We've got a phrase match negative for best price. So if anybody types in best price for best price, Mexicano doors, best price, anything like that, if the phrase best price appears, it gets blocked. The ad won't show. And so on and so forth down here. These exact match negatives, literally just that phrase is blocked, nothing else. So usually negatives need to be a mix. You know, the phrase best price, I don't care how you've incorporated that into your search term. If you've used the phrase best price, we don't want your click because, I don't know, maybe it's not the best price on this website. We don't think we'll make the sale, so we're blocking it. Same with cheap LPD, we're blocking that. Hardware, jobs, joinery, you know, this company doesn't come out and fit doors. It doesn't do any kind of service like that. So we're blocking those sorts of phrases and so on. You can even create lists of negative keywords. And you see some of the negative keywords in here, general kind of negatives. And you can add those lists in as well. And you actually manage those negative keyword lists from the tools up here under the shared library. And that's useful because when you've got various different campaigns, you may well have negative keywords, which are just, it doesn't matter which campaign it is, my ads should never show for these keywords. And it might be, you know, secondhand, used, manuals, reviews, instructions, repairs, you know, things that you don't do, but relate to the stuff that you sell or the services you provide. Free, for example, you know, you could have you probably never want to give anything away for free. Certainly you don't want to spend money on the keyword free because you're trying to make money. So you would have a general negative keyword of free on the list, and you apply that list to every campaign. Makes it easier to manage and automatically block stuff that you don't want. So that's how negatives work as well. And this example here just gives you an idea of how broad the matching can be across these different keywords. So exact match for oak internal doors will only match exactly that search phrase, oak internal doors. The old phrase match matched phrases. So it would match anything that included exactly the phrase oak internal doors. But that's not true anymore. It now works like the modified broad match used to work. Phrase match now does the same thing, which is as long as as long as all of those words are used in any order, in any way, doesn't matter, but as long as the words themselves all appear in the search term, then the ad will be displayed. So although interior oak veneer doors is not, and you'll notice interior and internal are different words, but they are close enough that Google considers them to be synonyms, so it will match those, and that would even be true of exact match. Here we've got oak internal doors. If you say interior oak veneer doors, or veneer doors even, because that's, you know, misspellings will get included as well, then interior oak and doors all appear in your phrase match keyword, it will match, even though the phrase is broken by the insertion of veneer or veneer in there. Broad match, oak internal doors could match against pine external doors. I've seen that happen because Google thinks doors, wood, yes, okay, I'll show the ad. And that's the danger of using broad match. So I strongly advise against that in almost all circumstances. So here you've got a negative broad match for veneer, and that basically means however you spell veneer, it will be blocked. So if you search for veneered oak doors, veneer doors, all of those will be blocked. They won't show your door. They won't show the ad. And the same is true in reverse phrase match and exact match. All work the same way, but in a negative sense to block the ads being displayed. Okay, so that's how keywords work. Some of you are probably thinking, great, but can I get any data on these keywords? Can I get some ideas of what other keywords people might be using? Because, you know, you can't be expected to think of every possible thing people search for. And the good news is the answer is yes. It's this tool here called Keyword Planner. So Keyword Planner lives in the Tools and Settings menu here with the spanner icon. Under Planning, there it is, Keyword Planner. And if you click on Keyword Planner, this is where you'll land up. And what you want is discover new keywords. And you simply put in your seed phrase here. So what was I using on there? Boiler repair. So if I put in boiler repair as my term here, get results, then this is essentially what we see on the slide. And what you can see is that there is a 12-month plot of the amount of searching from one month to the next for all of the keywords in the list, not just my one keyword, but all of the 450 keyword ideas that Google's listed down here. And that helps me understand if there's any seasonality. And unsurprisingly, with boiler repair, it does rather go up when the colder months come along. Down below, we've got the data for each individual keyword. So my initial keyword, boiler repair, gets an average of 9,900 searches a month, but obviously that's quite different depending on the month in question. Pretty low in the summer, much higher autumn, winter. And then you've got all these other keyword ideas: boiler repair near me, British gas boiler repair, emergency boiler repair, boiler servicing, and so on. And there's absolutely loads of them. Not all of them will be relevant to you, obviously. You know, if you don't do oil heating stuff, then you wouldn't be interested in any oil related keywords, for example. But that is a pretty handy tool to give you an idea of how many people a month are searching for these things, so the relative popularity of the keywords compared to each other. And on the right hand side here, you can see Google is giving you a range of how much you'll need to spend if you want your ad to be in the top 4 positions. So when they say top of page, they mean the ads above the organic results. And you can see it's a fairly broad range. That's quite normal to see. Obviously, the broader the range, what that really tells you is it varies more, probably over the year. And as you might expect with something like boiler repair, it's probably more expensive to bid on these keywords in October than it is in August. That's probably no surprise to anybody. So lots of keyword ideas in here, and you might go, oh, that's a good one, that's good. You might also see things in here that make you think that's a good negative keyword. So the negative keywords here, you might pick out oil, for example. If you don't do oil, you might pick out brands you don't do, that kind of stuff. So the keyword plan is a very, very important thing to do. So keep those keywords tightly themed in individual ad groups. Lots of small ad groups with a small amount of keywords is better than one massive one. Make sure you use those match types effectively. Start with just exact match if you've got a small budget, because you've got more control over that. And make sure if you're using phrase match or anything else that you use negative keywords. You don't need negative keywords for exact match because you're only matching your own phrases and nothing else. Yeah, the lists are handy as well in there. So this just shows you where the negative keywords live in the menu on the left-hand side. And this shows you where you can add negative keyword lists, as I mentioned before. One final thing before I just wrap up to take some questions. The bidding strategy, generally for and I'm talking about individual keyword level here. Click-through rate is a big factor in quality score. Inevitably, if you bid low on a keyword, it's going to appear far down the list. The further down the list your ad is, the lower the click-through rate is. The lower the click-through rate is, the lower the quality score is. The lower the quality score, the lower your ad is. And you get into a vicious sort of ever-decreasing circle scenario, sucked into the vortex, where the click-through rate goes down, the quality score goes down, the click-through rate goes down because the ad's gone down, and so on. So you've got to bid high enough to get in the top 4, really. And if you're not in the top 4, then you know that's generally not a good thing. The keyword planner tool is good, but you know those ranges are very broad for top of page bids, so you need to experiment with it once you're running a live campaign. And once you do have a live campaign, of course, what you need to do is check the data, i.e. This stuff here. You need to check what your actual cost per click is and what your click-through rate is. And if it's too low, you may well need to bid higher so that your ad's higher up and gets more clicks, or you need to make a better ad, which is something we'll talk about next week. Okay, so that's it for this week. We're kind of pausing halfway through. There are many other things I need to tell you, and that's all going to come along next Wednesday, same time, 1 o'clock. We're going to talk about ads, writing ads, and all the rest of it, shopping ads, all the rest of it. But before we finish for this afternoon, does anybody have any questions or want me to go back over anything that we've covered this afternoon? There you go. Mina, have you got a question there?
Yeah, all I was just going to say was that was quite clearly explained about over Google Ads. So thank you for that.
Oh, no, that's great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, looks like Darren's okay for questions as well. You okay there, Derek?
Yeah, good, thank you. An awful lot to think about.
Yeah, it's tough to fit all of this into 2 hour-and-a-half sessions, I have to say. But good news is you'll be sent the slides, so you can go back over it and ponder the bits you need to. But yeah, if we've got no questions, then I'm going to hand back.
Sorry, Ian. Can I?
Oh,
sorry, yeah. Sorry, I was just saying, would you suggest that you sort of do it yourself then for your website, or because a lot of businesses use somebody else, like an external agent, to do that?
Yeah. It really depends if you've got the budget to afford it, and whether it's something that you're interested in and you think you've got the time for, as well as the skills. Obviously, if you're only going to spend a few £100s a month on the ads, an agency is probably going to charge you a few £100s to manage it, so you're doubling the cost of it. But if they know what they're doing and you can afford it, then it takes that problem off your plate. You don't have to learn it all yourself, and because they should be experts who do this, a lot of this, they will probably be able to get better performance than you would starting out from scratch with no knowledge. So it's one of those classic things, that it's a cost benefit analysis. Is it worth your time and effort, and do you even have that to do it yourself? But equally, you can't spend money you don't have. So if somebody's going to charge you hundreds of pounds a month and you can't afford that, then you don't really have much choice but to do it yourself. Generally speaking, if you can afford it, I would expect to get better performance from an agency, because they should know what they're doing and they should have done it 100 times for other clients, so they can just get straight in and make it work right. But then you're into a different conversation of how do you find a good agency versus a bad one, and all the rest of it, which is a topic for a different day perhaps. But
just one question,
down to if you can afford it. Say again, sorry?
Just one question. In terms of return on investment, how does Google Ads compare to the likes of Facebook and Instagram?
It very much depends on the context of what you're advertising. So, and obviously how good you are at running the campaigns on both, and all the rest of it. But yeah, if you're selling products or services that are commonly sought, i.e. there are people going to Google and looking for a business like yours every day, then it's rare that Facebook ads delivers a better ROI than Google.
Yeah.
Because Google, you are targeting people in the moment that they're actively looking for what you're trying to sell them. And if you get all your option, your keywords, targeting, and all the rest of it right, then you'll be getting your ads in front of people who want what you're trying to sell them, which is obviously a much easier sell than Facebook, where you're targeting them based on some combination of demographics and interests, and hoping to distract them from what they're doing on Facebook enough that they click over to your site and think, oh yeah, actually that would be a good idea. That, if I'm trying to sell somebody boiler repairs, Facebook isn't really the place to do it, because if you need your boiler repaired, you'll be frantically searching Google for a plumber. You won't be going on Facebook. You might go on Facebook and say, anybody know a good plumber, but you can't target people on Facebook because they've done that. So that doesn't work. But the reverse is true if you're trying to advertise something to people that they didn't even know they could have. Nobody's going to go to Google and search for something they've never heard of. So you need social media ads to make people aware of something in the first place. Also, it depends on the targeting options you've got. So if you're selling stuff to people because they like Gardener's World, and specifically they will buy your stuff because they like Gardener's World, then I've got good news for you, because you can target people on Facebook based on the fact that they're interested in Gardener's World.
Yeah.
So that might work. But if you're trying to sell stuff to people for other reasons and you can't use that as a targeting option on Facebook, it becomes much harder to find the right people. And also on Facebook, it's like display advertising. they're not on Facebook to look for you. They're on Facebook to do whatever they do on social media, and you're trying to distract them from that enough to get their attention and to click over. And it can work really well for some things.
Yeah.
But if you're selling sort of everyday meat and two veg products and services, the only thing that I generally use Facebook ads for is remarketing, i.e. they've already been to my website. So I know I'm targeting the right people because they've already visited my website. They already know who I am. They've already showed an interest. That can definitely work. But yeah, other than that, I'd expect Google Ads to deliver a better ROI.
My business is new, and it sells products to assist people to meditate and relax. So I would have thought that's quite niche and would probably sit quite well with Google Ads then.
Yeah, if the kinds of things you sell are things people know exist,
yeah,
they may not know your business or your brand, but if they know that they exist and they go looking for them on Google, then I would say I'd expect that to work.
Yeah.
If it's something new and it's a new way to help people relax that isn't yet widely searched for because nobody really knows about it, then you'd be better with Facebook ads and targeting based on people's interest in, yoga, Pilates, or stress relief, or whatever, and they are interests within the Facebook system that you can use to target.
Yeah.
But I would always expect to be able to sell something to somebody who's actively looking for it far easier than
of course
who may or may not be interested in it based on what Facebook knows.
Yeah. Excellent.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so I'm going to hand back over to Sadia, who's going to just explain a couple of things to you about the program.
Thank you very much, Ian. Firstly, thank you everyone for attending this webinar, and a big thank you to Ian for sharing all that knowledge with us. Thank you, Ian. And as Ian was saying, there's just a lot of content here. So we have got a second session happening the same time next week. So you've registered to this one, so you'll automatically receive the links, etc., to get onto that one as well. So we look forward to seeing you again then. I just want to take a really quick minute for two things, just to let you know what other support's available out there. And secondly, I'm going to launch a very quick poll with generic questions to get some feedback, as we're quite interested to know how people find these webinars. So on that slide, Ian, we've got an overview of the events that are coming up. So I'll share these with you. There's some masterclasses happening as well to look at for those. You can register in the same way as you did for this one on Eventbrite, etc. So once you've got these slides, the link's at the bottom of that slide. So if you just click onto there, you'll see what's coming up. There we go, there's that link. And then the last few slides, I'll just give an overview, Ian, rather than me go through each slide in the interest of time. So it's to direct everybody's attention to a programme that we Winning Moves are working on with Hull and East Yorkshire Growth Hub. It's the Digital Catalyst programme, which provides one-to-one support to businesses for free. And it's impartial, independent. We have a good few experts in digital technology working on that Digital Catalyst programme with us, so we can support projects in pretty much any area of digital technology. So well worth coming on board with us. It's independent, as I say, free and impartial, so it's really just a time investment from the business for the support. Some example projects listed on this slide here. Those are definitely not exhaustive, as it says there. We have lots of experts with knowledge in various areas, so any requirements, needs that you have, we should hopefully be able to help with those. We will run a digital diagnostic on your business in the first part, which will let you know what kind of area you may need support in, or if there's anything in particular that you want us to focus on, then we can do that as well. At the moment, the programme is fully subscribed, so we will keep your details to hand if you are interested in the programme and contact you as soon as more spaces become available. But really want you to just want to make you aware that that's out there, so that you can let us know now if it's something that is of interest. On this last slide, we've got the contact details for us. So that number will bring you through to us, and the emails we also pick up. So if you want to express your interest and haven't done so already, then please do so via those channels, and we'll keep your details, as I say, to hand, and get in touch once we've got more spaces. That's that's everything really on that. If you've got any questions, feel free again to use that email address or the telephone number to ask.